Everyone, I'm Pete Porman from the University of Texas at Dallas, and it's my pleasure to be able to moderate this panel here today, where we are asking the question, how can small, that is small companies, win big with the Department of Defense? And with us today, we have actually 4 experts in that space. Dr. Victor Fishman, who is responsible for encouraging research activity with universities and companies here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and throughout Texas. David Shaw, Noel Tuss, and Mr. Question Marks here, Dave Copps. And I'm going to let you folks introduce yourselves. So let's start alphabetically by first name. So we go with Dave Copps.
Okay, great. My name is Dave Copps. I'm I guess a little bit of a serial entrepreneur. I built and sold 2 companies. I'm on my 3rd one now. Most of them are, or actually all of them are have been based in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So that's been my area. For a long time, we've been selling into the government, the DoD, and the intelligence community. So I was excited to be a part of this panel. I'll leave it at that.
Terrific. And I'm sure as we talk more, we'll drill down a little bit in that selling into the DoD. Yeah. David.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So I'm David Shaw, co-founder of a company called Astropi based in Dallas. We've got a communications capability to optimize bandwidth, to enable you to get more information through a channel using less signal power. So almost all of our focus was commercial. It's frequency agnostic, so it's satellite, terrestrial, wireless, sensors, really anything that emits an RF signal. And then stumbled into one of the AFWERX programs about 1.5 years ago. And so that got us engaged with defense. And there's quite a bit of interest in what we're doing because they're dealing with communication channels that are capacity constrained. But of course, they're also needing to operate in harsh environments with people trying to disrupt the signal or intercept the signals. Thanks, Pete.
Yeah, terrific. Noel.
Yes. Hey, everybody. My name is Noel Tuss. I'm a proud Air Force veteran and military spouse. I was a nuclear missileer in the Air Force and then transitioned into government contracting on the civilian side. I am now the director of capture and contracts at Long Capture. We help small businesses enter defense programs through strategy, proposal creation, contract administration for any type of DoD innovative solicitation that's out there.
We're actually a customer of long contracts, long capture, so we're working together.
Yes.
So.
Yep.
Terrific. Well, maybe we can come back to that in just a minute. So yeah. I thought might give each of you just a few minutes here, since we have 40 minutes remaining in our session, and if you could just tell us a little bit. I guess particularly Dave and David, as they're personally leading companies that are involved, and talk about how you picked the DoD as a market, where you've had some traction there, and if you got a top level takeaway or 2 to give to our audience, share that. Dave?
Sure, yeah. I think initially, we kind of fell into it. I've always been building artificial intelligence and machine learning, and so those technologies are in high demand in the defense industry. I think in a lot of ways, AI could start to tell the story of where defense goes next. I mean, it's that big, so it's a natural thing for my companies to get involved with the Defense Department. Also, it's just kind of an interesting place because I'll speak particularly about the Air Force. I think the Air Force is a wonderful organization to get involved with, them and the Space Force, in particular around innovation, as an innovation partner. The funding, can be significant. It can be in the millions of dollars. It's non-dilutive, which if you're a private company, if you're a startup, non-dilutive capital is an awesome thing. And I think also the Air Force is patient and they're realistic. I mean, they look for technologies that are cutting edge, and so they understand that they're not expecting it to be perfect. They want to go down through this journey with you, so they're looking for technologies that offer a lot of possibility in helping to protect the warfighter or to help us be stronger in our national security. So it's a really great place. I think so. I think that the Air Force is really they have about $1 billion annually. I think so. They're probably one of the largest early stage investors there is. And there's also, I think, over 160. David, you probably know better than me, but there's well over $150 billion in the year in the military market. So if you're successful, there's there's a lot of opportunity there. So I think there's a lot of reasons, especially in a time like this too. I think it's one thing to note that the defense industry, their budget never goes down, especially in the IT community. I think it goes up 6% a year, regardless of what's happening in the economy. So it's always a good place to be. So,
and I also think, just kind of adding on to that, especially with like AI and ML, like there's so many use cases. So there's so much growth potential once you enter like a DoD or Air Force market. They're constantly looking to grow systems, learn how to, better systems that they already have. So there's a lot of use cases that, technology can fit into.
Okay.
I was just going to coattail on what Dave was saying. So for us, the money's there. And really to this point, we're fortunate we've been addressing it for about the last year and a half to cultivate a lot of these opportunities because the commercial stuff's pretty much in risk off mode. And so money's there. The projects can be quite sizable. The challenge is finding, where the right spot is for what you're doing and being able to cultivate that. But there now is a lot of organizations and a lot of people to help narrow that gap. And the reason is there, and especially the Air Force, but it's now the other branches as well, are aggressively trying to find innovative companies because the light bulb finally went off that so many early stage companies don't want to bang their head against the wall dealing with defense acquisition. And they realized that the capability gaps between our adversaries are narrowing, and especially in satellite, but really across the board for a lot of reasons. And so they're now very aggressively out trying to find a lot more innovation and figure out a way to accelerate the acquisition. We were in the first AFWorks phase 1 cohort, and they were making that up as they went. And we had the contract, found out about it, submitted a proposal, got an email that we had won, but we had to respond back by 4 o'clock that afternoon. That was about a 2-hour window. We accepted it. We had a PO within a week, executed that, and the countersigned PO was in my inbox the next morning. So start to finish, it was a feasibility deal, but we were under sale within 5 weeks. We just got accepted to the Space Challenge, which is a pitch one-on-one opportunity with the program managers and the PEOs with the money. So that's coming up next week. We're quite excited about that. We were in the first Air Force Pitch Day in New York, which that also was a real treat. And I can tell you what not to do, but they are very serious about trying to get early stage companies in across all sorts of things. It would surprise you. It's not just esoteric AI, ML, communication stuff. They're trying to figure out base of the future and all sorts of things. So it couldn't be a better time to be getting engaged. Yeah.
So Noelle, I'm wondering if you could kind of riff off some of the things that David said. He referenced a couple of times that the real challenge was discovering the opportunities. I think you used the words stumbled into an Air Force Works opportunity. And Noelle, I know you have some experience there.
Yeah, so as David had said, there are so many innovative opportunities popping up with all military branches. I mean, Navy just started Tech Bridges, Naval X, Air Force has AF Ventures, AFWorks. There's all these challenges that are starting to pop up, all of these programs. Really, it's becoming very competitive. So David kind of got in early, being a part of that first cohort. Obviously, there is a lot more competition within the cohorts and these challenges and those types of things. But really, there is opportunities everywhere. You just kind of have to know where to find them. A lot of them are posted on LinkedIn. Beta.Sam, I mean, even Facebook, they post the stuff on there now. So knowing where to look and find opportunities is really crucial, because there's such strict deadlines, there's such strict requirements. So knowing how to find and then being able to answer is really important.
Lots of positive head nodding there. So I'm sensing a lot of agreement with what you said about reading the fine print and conforming. And Dave, you've had some significant success of working under the federal acquisition regulations. How does that happen?
I think you choose the right partners. So yeah, again, we're partnering up with Long Capture to kind of, I think what you do as an entrepreneur is you try to figure out all the different ways that you can elevate the possibility that you will receive an award. So you look at lots of different things. So one of those is finding awards that are relevant. So we're working with Long Capture to do that. We're filtering through all the new SPRs that just came through, and to understand which ones are really, do we have a chance of competing for, and the time to actually work on those. But I think the other thing is, you've got to look at the product that you have. I mean, certain things will fund faster and better than other things. And then I think also in the past, we've done a really good job of partnering effectively. So I think, where you are in the process of your company, if you're real small, if you're a single person or several people in a startup to a small company, you may have to play it differently. So do you go partner with a prime, someone like a Northrop Grumman or a Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or someone like that, to help you kind of gain access and to answer the things that you don't know the answer to as a small startup. If you had not done this before, I'm telling you, there are so many gotchas. And as David was talking about earlier, there's so many things you have to know to look out for to be successful. You give up a little bit. So, when you work with the prime, you're essentially giving away a third of whatever you would have got without the prime. But I mean, honestly, I think it's very worth it, So could the primes provide continuity and back office contract support and management and how to work with a contracting officer? There's all these things that startups don't really have any exposure to, and you've got to equip yourself to be ready. And so you do that by partnering with people like Long Capture and choosing a prime that is already doing work in the area that you're submitting the SBIR for, things like that. So just be smart about it. Don't go into it thinking you know the answers, because I'm telling you right now, you just don't. There's so much that you don't know if you've not done this before. You almost have to fail a lot of times before you figure it out, and you can not have that happen so abruptly if you partner with the right people.
Yeah, so we look at it as an alignment deal, and to the point about the cumbersome nature, part of that depends on the contracting vehicle. So, if you're subject to the federal acquisition regulation, that's one thing, but SBIRs are really very favorable in terms of maintaining your equity and your data rights and things like that. And then there's been a mad dash to consortia and other transaction authority, which gives a lot more latitude in how you can put together teams and projects to move faster. So again, from where we're sitting, it's never been easier. And then internally, it's like, man, nothing's easy. It doesn't matter who you're trying to convince, whether it's a commercial teaming partner or an end customer. I would submit why the defense may have some hurdles that are different. They're not terribly different. You're just getting beat with a different stick, I guess is the kind of way we look at it. And the money's there, right? And then the other thing is to keep in mind that I think is really, really important is, they're acquiring products or capabilities. So unlike the NSF that's funding basic research, they have a specific end in mind, even with the basic S&T type requirements. So you're well served to really try to dig in and try to get with the technical people on the other end of it and find out where they're thinking the technology would best be placed. And so you can start mapping that, and then that'll help you maybe identify some of the teaming partners that you need. If you, to Dave's point, if you put yourself on the other end of the table, it really lessens their risk, the Defense Department and the acquisition, to deal with a team that's got the performance capability and the balance sheet, and there's no question that they're going to be around, 2 or 3 years in.
Hey, Pete, I think it's important to talk about like the program that we've kind of been speaking to, this SBIR STTR program, because if you don't know it, then it just sounds like acronyms and why.
Yeah, and I just dropped a link into the chat, but
Yeah.
Noelle, if you could briefly outline it for our audience, I think that would be terrific.
Yeah, so SBIR STTR program is for small businesses that want to work with the federal government. It's a research and development based program. Phase 1 is feasibility. So each federal agency kind of does it a little bit different. Air Force does it as like a pure customer discovery, going out, finding end users to connect with. But Navy, because they have more specific topics, they actually have your customer, you're working with them to truly develop a feasibility study, kind of do a concept design, those types of things. That's the same with Army as well. But after you get chosen for a phase 2, that's actually R&D. You're going in, you're prototyping with your end user. So you're working with them, developing, modifying your solution. The way that it's working right now is commercial solutions for government warfighter needs. So then after you go through the full prototyping, you go into a phase 3, which is a sole source acquisition with the government. So sole source acquisition, it can be really any type of contract vehicle, and it can be any ceiling. So there is no max, there's no min either. Obviously, I guess $1, but because it has to be a contract. But that phase is kind of a very easy way for small businesses to get entry into the government, because like Dave and David said, primes are, you're always competing against those primes. So by using this program, there's SBIR funding, so your end user isn't having to pay for your prototyping. They can always put money on top. You're getting paid while you're doing this research and development. So it can be a win-win for both the small business and for the defense end user.
One thing that jumps to mind too is, so how do you find all these people? Because usually when you get a solicitation that's out there, it's got a technical point contact, and they really just respond to email. But there's these consortiums that are broad-based, dealing with all sorts of things, and the membership in those is maybe $500 a year, and you've got everybody aligned with your area of interest, whether it's a traditional contractor, and most importantly, the program executive offices and the people that have the authority to put the money out, that are mapping it into a larger program or larger platform. So that's out there. And then you of course also have different conferences that are specific to different topics. And there's now never a better time to try to get in front of these people than virtually, where they'll have an industry day where they're out looking for people, with early stage ideas.
Yes, and honestly, because of COVID, a lot more people are doing virtual. I mean, Softworks has a first Tuesday where you can go and sign up and pitch. They're doing virtual colliders, networking events. AppWorks Challenges is a really great place to meet end users, customers as well.
So you mentioned meeting end users, and maybe we could kind of go back to the SBIR STTR programs for just a moment and talk about what's required in terms of engagement with a customer, and maybe also what if there are values to bringing in a research partner like a university.
Do you want me to answer this one? Or
sure.
Okay.
or everybody chime in.
Yeah, I was gonna say SCTR. I really think that it is a pretty powerful program, because a lot of these researchers at universities already kind of have connections within the DoD that they're working with. So having working with direct DoD connections, you're kind of already establishing the pipeline for a phase 3 potential. And obviously there's, IP, intellectual property that needs to be, discussed, how your teaming agreement is going to work with your research partner and those types of things. But if you are able to, and I don't think I went over the STTR program, so that's where it's basically they're the same program, but it's working with a research institution through it. So, I mean, that's really it. For me, it's kind of setting you up from the beginning for that phase 3, for that big win.
So on the STTR, oh, excuse me, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we just submitted one as a special topic through AFWorks, and normally there's a huge timing issue with that. So for us, we've got a significant amount of intellectual property that we're bringing in, and you have to have a university or not-for-profit partner. So if you don't have a relationship established and your data rights agreement in place, it is very difficult to try to get all that stuff turned around in time to have it as part of the proposal going forward. And so we have a relationship with the university on a small machine learning contract through the NSF, and went back to them and said, hey, can we amend the agreement? Is this something on a feasibility you'd be interested in? So we were able to address that. And then we take a step back, and that too was on a short fuse, maybe 4 weeks. But then it occurred to us, well, gosh, we're in shutdown and it's summer. So a lot of the university folks are going to be on vacation or maybe tough to get together. So there aren't going to be a lot of people in the hopper on this one, I don't think. And we'll find out. I think they'll move fairly quickly. But the main point is to don't wait around, go identify potential university teaming partners, because the feedback we get is that really de-risks the decision for defense, where you've got some credibility built in by the academic side of it. It's just hard to get it to sew it all together. So you really don't want to wait around on that and find individuals that can help you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, especially on the STTRs, a university partner is really required. But yeah, we're involved in a couple efforts right now and we're involving both University of North Texas and Texas A&M. And as I think Noel said earlier, these universities already have exposure into DoD, and so it is a feather in your cap if you're utilizing research that's happening at a university that's relevant to the project you're working on.
Well, and I guess I'd add from my experience, in many ways, the purpose, particularly of STTR, is to get commercialization or societal benefit from the research investments that have been made in our academic institutions in this country. And so, not surprisingly, as you said, Dave, in many cases, a partnership with an academic is required. So it's, and as David said, academia has its own schedule. There's sort of a myth out there that faculty are, they work 3 hours a week, right? Because that's the lectures they have or something. And I might have shared some of that perspective when I was in industry, but having joined the institution, these are extremely busy people, and getting appropriately into their schedule and into their pipeline of activities does take some lead time. My purpose at the university is to help facilitate those conversations. So
yeah, so it's not the faculty is really not the issue from our perspective. It's on the diets. It's when you've got to flip it over to the Office of Technology and Licensing, and you start getting into the agreements and making sure, because they've got a lot of other things they're working on as well, and trying to get the turn times. So that's where some of the challenge exists. And so it's just another reason to try to get on it earlier. And I would submit to you that the universities are more aggressive now than they've ever been to try to accelerate those issues.
And
we think of it as supportive, but
yeah.
For extremely small businesses, so businesses that have never really done SIB or SITR, I think it's hard to just know how to engage research partners or nonprofits, finding the right one to meet your technology, knowing, because not all researchers research everything. So knowing who to reach out to, who the proper, channels are, it definitely does take some time.
Yeah, agree with that.
Yeah, so mentioned, Noel, you mentioned bringing those to, I think even clear down to into sole proprietors. And we do have a question in the chat about how sole proprietors can play in this space as opposed to a small company, whatever your definition of that might be.
Yeah, so established for the SBIR STTR program, a small business is, you have to have under 500 employees. You have to be majority owned by US citizen. Work has to be accomplished in the United States. And then some agencies have the COC, so majority owned venture capital operating companies. They are allowed to apply, but most federal agencies do not. So if you're more than 50% owned by venture capital companies, then you unfortunately cannot apply to SBIR, STTR. So size, anything under 500 employees is small business. So whether you're one person shop applying or a 499 person business, you are considered small business and you can apply for SBIR, STTR.
Yeah, I would encourage teaming, and find again somebody that'll help improve your chance of the proposal by de-risking the decision on the other end of it.
And that is very true. We've had companies that have come to us where, working kind of as a mentor role with a larger small business, and for them to be competitive, like I said, the program is getting way more competitive. One of the main evaluation criteria is commercialization. So having revenue, having sales, having investment backing are all things that the evaluators are looking at, because as Dave and David said, they're trying to de-risk their investment. When they started Nick Sean, he said, phase 1 is small bets, phase 2 is medium bets, and then phase 3 is obviously our large bet. So they're trying to level it out, and they're trying to ensure that their investment into your company is as risk adverse as possible.
Yeah, I do have a friend that was a sole proprietor who ended up winning in a contract, but he specifically went to a prime with his technology, and it became part of the offering. So that's the way he, in particular, won in that case. So you can do things as a sole proprietor, but I think the smaller you are, the more partnerships you need to be successful. It's like Noel said, I mean, they look at a lot of things, not the technology, but has your technology been validated in the market in any way? Do you have customers? Are they happy? Those are all validations of your technology or your product or the service that you're offering. So you can come in as a sole proprietor, but just be prepared to not do it on your own. I wouldn't recommend that at all.
Yes, and one of the things I see small businesses fail in the SBIR, STTR realm is by overpromising, by saying that they can, accomplish a scope of work, getting a contract for a scope of work, and then not being able to, operate, put any return on that contract. So you do want to ensure that, even if you only have 10 people on the company, that you're not overpromising to the government, because that could have really detrimental impacts to future contracts, future work, those types of things.
One point I'd like to make on that is we look at it as the all-in transition capability. So if you're going into it looking at a $125 or $150 or $200,000 6-month contract, that would challenge you to no, go ahead and map out the second phase of that, which all of a sudden you're at $750,000 to maybe $1.5 million, and over a 24-month period roughly to deliver a prototype. And then you extend that on out. For example, the Air Force has, through part of the AFWERX program, a strategic phase 2, I believe is what they call it. And that's a 1-to-1 to 2 match. So we're in market for venture funding, and that would be the 2. So say that's $5 million. The SBA will match the 1, would be another 2.5. There's another 2.5 through, I think, the OSD, the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So that's 10 million, of which half is non-dilutive, on top of what the phase two would be, which is up to another $1.5 million. So all of a sudden you're looking at $11 million over 2 to 3 years to deliver something that can really be kicked around, and over half of that's non-dilutive money. That at that point, teaming partners are interested because you've got money to compensate them for their time. The end users interested because they're de-risking it with other money, which is SBA SBIR money. And of course, investors are interested because they're getting a significant bang for their buck in the non-dilutive money that's coming in the form of these other awards. And you're hard pressed to find that somewhere else.
So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about something that came up real early on in the conversation, which is acceptance of early stage technologies. You have the classic in the commercial realm of something that an invention that essentially dies before it can gain significant traction. And what role do these defense contracts play in letting you take that technology forward to where it can be consumed in the commercial market?
Yeah, I'll start. Yeah, I think it's in some way the early stage investing through the government is critical to that process. Like I said, the more tolerance there is to help you explore how possible this is. They, unlike other investors, the DoD kind of looks at the possibility of what you're doing, because if it in fact can be done, then the payoff is huge. So it's worth a high amount of risk, if you will. So the other thing that they bring that I think is very hard for small companies to gather in the early days, especially if you're a technology company like ours, is data, access to data. You think about, in our world, the AI community is heavily weighted towards the large companies, the Googles and people like that, because they have such a massive access to data. And that gives them an advantage that small companies don't have. And so, in a way, if you start working with either a large prime or directly with the government, the DoD, and you're given access to that data, you can kind of level that playing field. So it's great to have access to real data that can help prove out your technology very, very quickly.
Yeah, our experience has been, I guess the feedback we get is the perfect world is you've already got commercial customers, and then you can harden whatever the end product is, whether it's encryption or hardware for mill grade use. And what makes that attractive is you've got a lower cost base. So the defense doesn't have to come in and buy 100 of something. You've already commoditized the delivery point. So it theoretically reduces their cost. The challenge, for us is we're kind of going in a parallel path with commercial and defense and have interest in both. The other is when you're teaming with partners, and I alluded to it a minute ago, you think they've got big internal research and development budgets, and they really don't, relatively speaking to their overall balance sheet. And so they're dependent upon other people's money, which is defense research, to try to advance some of the things they're doing. And so there's an incentive structure to bring in early stage companies, but if it's a phase one SBIR, there's not a lot of money to go around. You really want to have that tied up, and it goes back to my comment earlier about a phase two where you've got them baked in and they can budget that, because you call somebody up, the time that someone's working with you, that's coming out of somebody's budget. And they just can't spend a lot of time on things that are interesting. They have got to be able to allocate it within their company's goal. So that's somewhat of a challenge.
Yeah, I guess I would just amplify that from personal experience. In one very large company I was with, the business unit I was in had a $230 million a year R&D budget, and it was allocated to the $10,000 granularity. There was no slush fund, right? And so I would imagine it's the same in the services and in the government in general. And so getting into the budget would be a critical thing.
I remember, Pete, we were at a industry day and met with the Navy, and we were walking away, and the two Navy guys, you could hear them say, we did not expect to see and hear anything like this today. And we overheard him and turned around and said, what did you just say? I said, oh yeah, this is unbelievable. I said, we've never heard. And so we thought we were golden. We were skipping out of there and ready to take the day off and all that. Well, as it turns out, they're intellectually interested, but they've got no budget to fund any effort for what we were talking about. So you really got to peel away the onion and identify that.
Very much. We've had a couple of questions in the chat about how to interact with these customer communities, whether it's identifying that sponsoring customer or even just understanding the need so that you can position your offering in a way they can consume. David mentioned some consortia, and we have a question about how you might select the right consortia to join. And then any other thoughts from our panelists on how a small business that isn't necessarily, if you will, defense savvy, can gain enough savvy to be successful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can jump in on the consortia. They're usually thematic. So we're members of the Space Enterprise Consortia, the National Spectra Consortia, C5, which is communications. And so you've got to root around and find them. They're usually set up where there is an independent management company that may operate several of them. So ATI out of Summerville, South Carolina, I think is one example. And they're fantastic because that's where you get the non-proprietary, non-classified forward look of the challenges they need coming from not the generals providing the inspirational messages, but this is coming from the program executive officers and the PMs that are actually executing. And there you can find alignment and generally meet them and see if there's interest in what you're doing or not, would be one of the ways.
And then also working with organizations like Long Capture that specialize in, consulting, that have the BD teams that can make those introductions for you. Especially a lot of our clients, some are pretty established, have had government contracts in the past, but some, like you said, just are not government savvy, don't understand rank structure, don't understand organizational structure. Who should you be talking to? What a PEO office is, those types of things. So having somebody that has a background in that's able to guide you through, that proposal process and then that contract administration could be really beneficial.
Yeah, I'll pile on that. I think the companies that have the most success have really good relationships with the contracting office. So in some ways, it might be that relationship itself is more important than the relationship with the actual government or military customer. So making sure your contract is broad and generic, and making sure the ceiling's really high and working with the contracting office to accomplish those things is really important. The other thing I'll say is I noticed that one of the questions was about viable routes to go through defense contractors. There's a very small circle in Washington, and so people know people, and the best way to get into these organizations is through other people. There are ways to do that, so we're actually forming our advisory board right now, and so we're working with a group, the Harvard group, to do that here in Dallas. But building an advisory board of people who can help you open those doors and who know people in the areas that you're trying to penetrate is a great thing. So it's definitely who you know. If there's one thing I've learned in this process of working in government contracts, who you know cannot be understated. It's very, very important.
So to coattail on both of those comments, one, we were introduced to Long Capture a couple of months ago and are need to engage with Noel to pick that conversation back up, because there's several companies out there that will write proposals that have claims on success rates and all that, but you really got to check of where they're from and who's behind it. So with her company, they're former defense and many times still have close ties to active defense. So they may be recently retired and they know these folks, right? So you can walk in or they can walk in. We can't, right? The other thing is to find potential advisors that Dave mentioned, for their board. Well, there's organizations like the National Defense Industry Association that's got a local chapter. AFCEA is another one that big. Both of them are national footprints. Have a lot of meetings and a lot of opportunity to meet people that can come in and serve as an advisor that have those same sorts of connections, and make sure there's alignment with what you do. We've met one, for example, through a referral at a coffee networking event that I go to pretty frequently here in town, and I would venture to guess that nobody in that group could explain what the hell I'm doing. But one of them said, "Oh, I've got someone you need to talk to." And it turns out he's very well qualified, a former special ops guy who's been on the communication and the acquisition side of things for a long time, and really narrowed gaps and helped us change the language we're using, for one.
Terrific. Well, we have 3 minutes left. And so maybe we could just one last lightning round, going back to alphabetical order, Mr. Question Mark. Dave, if you could, 1 minute, give us your final thoughts.
I think this is an endeavor that's worth pursuing. It does take a lot of effort and a lot of time. So don't go into it thinking that you're going to have a quick result and what you do is going to have an immediate result. It's not going to be that way. SBIRs, the current ones that are out now, you won't hear until next year, if you're awarded or not. So it does take a lot of work. It takes a lot of time for your people to get in and to fill out the paperwork and to do it properly. And so it's not something that you can ad hoc or in addition. Things you've got to really focus down on, have a team that's dedicated to making it happen, and then form the right partnerships to increase the possibility of receiving an award. So there's a lot of work to do it, but it's absolutely worth it.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah,
David.
Thank you, Pete. Let's not forget why we're here. It's not just about the money. We're trying to provide a capability to defend us all, and there's people out that are actual end users for what we're proposing, and so it's incumbent to really understand that and be able to make the case of why this will help them. And if you've got a compelling story and they grab onto it, they've got pathways to move very quickly on this. We hadn't found them yet, but they're there. For that very reason, right? So it's well worth the effort for non-financial and other reasons, and I would encourage you to do it because it's no more or less difficult than anything else you do as a startup.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. In my last company, we received a call from a gentleman in the IC community who told us that our technology had saved lives, and that it makes you stop and think. That's why we do it. Can we help make the country safer? Can we help protect our warfighters? Who are there, creating our the opportunity for us to have opportunities like this, create our freedoms. So it's definitely a higher calling.
All right, and thank you. And embedding cleanup.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to piggyback, the process can be lengthy, but it's worth it. It can really change the outcomes for a small business. It could be the first big win of that phase one, or even just being accepted to a challenge, whatever it is, could be a real deal breaker for the success of a business. So I always tell small businesses, keep pushing. If you want to apply. I don't foresee innovative small business programs going anywhere. I think they're going to be ingrained. So just continue pushing forward because the impacts are real.
Terrific. Well, and with that, we're at 11:45, our scheduled end time. Thank you very much to my panelists, to Dr. Fishman for organizing this, and thank you for being here today. Enjoy the rest of Dallas Startup Week.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Victor. See y'all. See you, Dave. See you, Noel.
Bye.